Good evening, and welcome to tonight's program featuring Ezra Wube. I wanted to start by just reminding everyone that you can post questions for Ezra using the Q&A button on your Zoom screens. My name is David Rifkind, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Architecture at Florida International University, where I'm also a faculty fellow in the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab. Tonight, it's my honor to host this program sponsored by the Wolfsonian and the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab. In a moment, I'm going to turn the screen over to Ezra, who will share his newest animated film, Una Favola Vera, or A True Fairytale. But first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our guest. Ezra Wube is a mixed media artist who was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. His work references the notion of past and present, the constant changing of place, and the dialogical tensions between here and there. He has exhibited work on 5 continents, in biennials, festivals, and museums in such countries as Brazil, France, South Korea, Latvia, Senegal, and the United States. His residencies, commissions, and awards include the Smackmelon Studio Program and Pioneer Works, both in Brooklyn, the Workspace LMCC Residency Program in New York, the Open Sessions Program at the Drawing Center in New York, the Africa Center, also in New York, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York City, the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, the Rima Hort Mann Foundation, the Triangle Arts Foundation Residency in Brooklyn, and the Substation Artist Residency Program at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. Ezra earned his BFA at the Massachusetts College of Art in Boston and an MFA from Hunter College in New York. Since 2015, he's organized the Addis Video Arts Festival, a platform for innovative international video art in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. In 2018, Ezra came to Miami Beach to create a video projection on the exterior wall of the Wolfsonian as part of the institution's ongoing project, Art of Illuminations. Ezra's project, Future Past, captured Miami Beach's unique character as a man-made fantasy land, from its origins as a mangrove swamp to its efflorescence of Art Deco and the neon nightlife playground of today. I'd like to share a clip from Ezra's 2018 film, Future Past. And once again, I want to mention that you can leave questions for Ezra at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And now I'm pleased to welcome Ezra Wube back to the Wolfsonian to discuss his latest work, Una Favola Vera, A True Fairytale. Hello, Ezra.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much, David, for the introduction. Thanks so much, everyone, for viewing this presentation. It's really a pleasure. I really like to thank the Wolfsonian Museum, John Mogul, of course, David Rifkind, and Oscar Reveling for making this presentation happen. Again, as David introduced me, my name is Ezra. I'm a mixed media artist working in painting and video, which becomes animation. I would like to share with you my project and my process. Share my screen with you 1 second. Well, in 2018, when I came to Miami Beach to do a project for the exterior side of the building, the museum's building, I encountered just extensive amount of research materials on the Ethio-Italy War, World War II, and I've never seen this many type of materials at once. It's such a big discovery, but I decided like it was just I needed to process the information And I was just more excited about being in a city. I decided to do more site-specific project, as David introduced me with my video, which has to do with the city and kind of relating the art with the city and its history. But also kind of thought about this like research material, how I could incorporate it. And it kind of sat down for like quite some times. And in 2020, during the pandemic, when the pandemic was like in kind of like lockdown, everybody's told to stay at home. Living in a big city, I always move around. It's really difficult for me to stay in one place, but I decided like I sort of needed like sort of to stay home, and somehow and then I had some idea about how to come around the project, and I thought about just making the project in my apartment, not like in my studio, kind of staying and then kind of producing something. And it was 2 years after I encountered the research material, so I was just thinking about it and how to approach it. So working from home during pandemic, usually I do paintings and my animation, which is there's just I make lots of mess, but it's at home, and I decided maybe to consider using plasticine. So that's the material I ended up using, but I'll talk about the process after the video, more details. So I encountered these materials from the Wolfsonian Museum collection, just extensive materials. Some of them were postcards, some of them were like game boards, children game boards, and they had like notebooks. Just most of these images are propaganda. Oh, sorry, I'll do yes, full screen. So most of these propaganda images were during the invasion of Italy, invasion of Ethiopia by the fascist Italy, which was in 1935. So they occupied Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, in 1936. So this propaganda material were made between this 5 years occupation of Ethiopia. So they're from like 1936, 37. There's just all these materials I've never seen before. Growing up in Ethiopia, it's just I've never encountered these resources or materials. And just looking at these materials, and I was just thinking how to sort of create like a narrative out of it. And I was viewing this work, for example, this work is like used for advertisement for, I think it's like a skincare product, which I used it in my animation. It's sort of like almost like the title frame. And then they have this like game board, like supposedly like the winner conquers Addis Ababa. It's like children game board. And I also incorporated that into my animation. And all these also advertisings, like Venus, like so there all these like kind of materials for propaganda. Again, war is expensive, and then Mussolini needed like the support of the people, and sort of using these promotional legitimizing the war, that it's okay to like invade a country. And then just another children game board. So all this just directly using some materials. And then there's a statue of Mussolini where he had it built in Ottawa. That was actually Italy invaded Ethiopia twice. The first battle was called Battle of Ottawa in 1896, where they lost the war. So this is the place where they lost the war. They got beat by Ethiopians, and then they sort of like put the statue to the same location, which is called Ottawa, as a statement. So I incorporated that. So I just kind of thought of it like a kind of a poetic image, like it's sort of like this vision, but it's kind of blind vision. So I thought it was really important, like sort of incorporating that kind of this blind vision into the imagery. And there was all these like postcards, and as you can see, this illustration, like sort of like everybody's kind of like portrayed as like a child, and then this is supposed to represent the Ethiopian king. So it's not quite direct, but I use some reference to it, like you can see the boots and stuff like that. And then notebook, this is like a back of notebook. Some of the materials that's used for propaganda. And sometimes, I would exaggerate some specific aspect of this is the same illustrator who also made these. And as you can see here, it's kind of simplified. I added some more elements to it, more figures according to my artistic license, and also like a postcard for membership. So anyway, this is just a few of them. There was lots of scenes, but again, like my initial inspiration is not just like finding materials. Like most of my work is actually deals with like this notion of past and present, and has to do with my own personal experience. Even if I research history, I connect it to my own like lived experience. But during pandemic, staying in the same place, so I just really needed to sort of like kind of escape. So it was kind of like a escape project. Also learning this history, I never knew such details. So it was interesting to kind of work on it, but my inspiration was really has to do with some project I had, like it didn't work out and failed. And then I just thought about like the idea of like romantic idea, and then idea of like intention, and also like doing action or an intention. Because it's sort of like this romantic idea of like a place, and then this romantic idea kind of, to the extreme point of being violent, of 300,000, over 300,000 people dying. So just it's just really something really heavy-handed, but I wanted to find a way to come around it. Also, like using the idea of plasticine. It's something like it's kind of playful. Also, some of the illustrations were for like children. So I also thought about like the desire, like how plasticine is about like you have to touch, you have to like grab it like to make something happen. And this idea of like romantic idea and desire, like trying to get something, try to grab something, I thought was would be interesting reference to it. So that's the presentation of the research material. And I'm going to go ahead and show you my videos now. I think there's a question I see. Do you also draw inspiration from current events in Ethiopia and Eritrea? That'll be like another project. It's I mean if it has to do with this like the occupation experience, perhaps, but are you asking what it has to do with like I don't know, the immigrants, or I'm trying to understand what current events in Ethiopia?
Wow, that is really phenomenal, Ezra, and I want to thank you again for sharing your work with us tonight. Before I start asking questions, and I know that you're going to tell us a little bit more, I wanted to remind our audience that you can leave questions for Ezra using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. But the first thing first I wanted to say, this is really tremendous work. And I also wanted to say too, that I'm very familiar with the work that was the source material for your project, because I've used it in my own research. But seeing it in this way really changes it, right? It changes it by giving it a very different context. And one of the things that it highlights is just how eerie some of this material is, right? I mean, these are some incredibly racist and imperialist things that are presented like children's games and little notebooks and things that just work their way into the everyday life of people during the fascist period in Italy. It's also interesting too, the way that you present this material that is, on the one hand, the Italian materials were really made for a domestic audience in Italy, as if Ethiopia didn't even exist or didn't have people who would consume the same materials. But you're presenting this work in a way that again gives it a new context by seeing it from Ethiopia. And so it's just really, it's extraordinary for me to see those same materials given a new life in this film. But I wanted to ask you too about your animation process, because it's really quite distinctive. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Thank you for the feedback. I make usually animation using Paint, and that's my background. I do painting. I take a picture and kind of repaint the same scene on top of it, and sort of make stop action animation through that process. But because of pandemic, I couldn't really use Paint. I had to stay home, and I decided I've never used it before. First time considered using plasticine. I also like to work vertically, but because of sort of like the constraint of space and use of material, it kind of forced me to adapt plasticine and working horizontally. I can share with you my I have some photographs studio set up. 1 second. So I'm just going to do present. My process, this is really not how I work usually. I don't actually like working horizontally because of my painting background. I like working standing up vertically, which I usually use a wall. This would be my common way of working. I staple canvas on a wall straight. I just like the idea of the work connected to the architecture of the space, and then sort of work with it and kind of adapt to the architecture of the space. This is just how I've been working for the past 10, 12 years. But I couldn't do this in my apartment, and the constraint of the space and material. I decided to use plasticine. So it's sort of kind of constructing it, and then I just folded a table, that's actually a foldable table, and I just gessoed it, and I would construct the scene. And I take a picture of it. As you can see here, I have a tripod, a camera here connected to my laptop. I have a shutter release here. I take a picture, and then I would use all these kind of sculptural materials, as you can see here, and then scratch off, smudge it, or scrap it, and just do the next scene. Sometimes I could reuse some things, possibly some things if they're not. Sometimes from the heat of the room temperature, the plasticine gets more more sticky. But when it's not, as you can see here, I'll have the cattle scene. I get to reuse it and reuse the plasticine material. I feel like it was the cleanest. I didn't make any mess. I usually have a big tarp on the floor when I do paintings, but in this case, I was managed to just keep clean and just not to worry about cleaning up. Again, I didn't really prefer working horizontally. One, the type of perspective I see is different than the way the camera sees. That's one thing I don't like about it. Vertically, the cameras or the way I see the camera experience is very different. But there's always a distortion from perspective, the way I look at it, and then the camera does different thing. So as you can see here, I would sketch out. So it's sort of obviously how would there's so many resource materials, how to decide. But I sort of gave it more like my own artistic license, and also kind of thinking as a film directing kind of. So from the promotion idea to and then first I pretty much sketched out all the materials as much as I whatever inspired me from the research, and then I sort of kind of intuitively because when I construct one scene, I have I work on it quite some time, so I have really good strong intuition for next scene. It sort of it kind of leads me to the next movement or opening scene. That's really how it's sort of constructed. And just I was thinking about again like the intention, like the promotion, the propaganda, like showing like the female, like or like showing all this the mineral resource, all that stuff, and then actually from promotion desire into like the event of the invasion, and then from the invasion, and then sort of like as if like the fairy tale realized into like kind of the kind of like Romanized Ethiopia. So that's really it was really interesting for me to look at the resources too, because this is like how someone thinks of Ethiopia, some other how things they think of Ethiopia. So it's really not like the way how I think of Ethiopia, but like the way even the characters are drawn. They're just like I mean it's also like very like such a horrible work, and then try to work from it. It was really uncomfortable. Usually most of my work has to do with like relating to like like relatability to a place and stuff like that. But this is like it's like World War II, like a type of life I never lived, but affected by its history. I grew up in Mercato, which is also a neighborhood that was constructed by the Italians as a segregation from the local market, and then also the newcomers. The newcomers they made piazza, they displaced the center and made it piazza, and then they built Mercato, which actually was where I grew up, and which I learned about it after I grew up, that it was built by the Italians. So anyway, there was all these influences I had, but sort of to really see this materials, it was kind of really difficult to work with because they're not rewarding. They're uncomfortable, some of them, and then, but it's still sort of to confront it and like see it and sort of learn about it was a really exciting experience. I'll take maybe some questions, but yeah, this is pretty much how the process was. I'll just smudge it, scrap it, and keep constructing. This is probably the last scene. Let me see questions.
And I wanted to ask you a question about the audio as well. We also have a question from one of the audience members about the audio, because these are also the sound is also archival material that you've incorporated into the work. And I was wondering if you could talk about that. The audience member who was asking about it said that he or she had a very emotional response driven by the images expertly combined with the audio. Please speak about producing the audio in the piece. Ending with saying, "I admit to feeling extremely overwhelmed by sadness."
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, audio usually is like the last thing I do. I do the visual part. I make the work, the movement, constructing, and audio also it's really important aspect because I feel like it's like just technically grounds the work. My resource was I used from archive.org. They have a really great documentary about the Italy war. Just like really great. It's like about 2 hours. So I used some of the sound sample from the archive.org, some of the Mussolini like speeches, and then like pre the war, during the war, all these elements that I used throughout the video. Also, I used sound effects and like this sound of like alarm, World War II war alarm, or all these different things. I kind of research and gathered materials, and also like sound effect that comes from the application itself. I use Final Cut Pro editing application for like footsteps or doors opening, something falling. Sound is really important for me to incorporate in my videos generally, because it's really sort of makes it more like animations like such a removed. It's imagination. It's imagination of movement, imagination of a pictorial depiction. Sound is like becomes the real. That's where actually I could use something real, and I feel like that's so important for my animation to use sound, because it gives you that real experience. In my other videos for sound, I do film recording. I sample play from a place I depict in my work, and actually really use that direct the sound of the place and to the work. That's really important for me. Any questions?
I also wanted to ask you a question because you mentioned as you were talking about this move from working on a vertical surface to a horizontal surface, that this is not how you normally work, but there's also a change in perspective. Do you think there's anything different about this film that you would not have done in a previous one just because of that shift from the vertical to the horizontal?
I mean, I would say like I could have actually worked vertically. Seems like the plasticine would have stayed the same place because you know it's kind of has this like a it's kind of has kind of adhesive nature to it. It would have probably stayed. So yeah, but I don't know. I think it's yeah. I would probably use it like vertically if I have you know the right conditions to go back to use the material again. I could have worked, but I couldn't do it obviously from my own apartment setting because I need space because I use macro lens too, which is it's fixed. You can't zoom in, zoom out. It's like a 1-to-1 ratio. So I need like a distance. That's also the issue of working you know, in a home setting for the project.
No, that's fascinating. And John Mogul, our colleague at the Wolfsonian, wanted to ask if after the pandemic, you're going to go back to using paint, or do you think you'll still use plasticine? He says, at least sometimes.
I think so. Definitely, I really think so. It's a different. It's more like it's more tactile. It's no brush, so it's all constructed by hand. So it has more like this, like you know, touching and right. So I think if it's relevant to it. Like for this project, I feel like it was relevant because also something about the color. It's very like muted. Has this heaviness to it. Something about visually heaviness about it. I feel like kind of fit that also the idea of that kind of the era or like the subject kind of something weighted about it. It's not like translucent. You know, paint is very translucent and you can have these layers and but this is more like it's like constructed. Everything's like a constructed. But I was surprised how actually convenient it was because in the paint you have this like reflective surface, like the paint has a reflectiveness about it, but plasticine is like matte, so which is great because I have issue when I do my painting animation. There's always reflection from the lighting. That was removed when I was doing the plasticine. So yeah, I definitely would like to consider it in another future. But we'll see. But it's more constraining, definitely, compared to painting. It's more gestural. You know, you can be everything you make the gesture in such a particular way rather than brush stroke. It's just a gesture, very different in that sense.
Yeah. One of our other attendees, Frank Palai, asks, what is the relationship between Italy and Ethiopia today?
I think it's I would say it's sort of like a past history. There's like a celebration like yearly, like the commemorate like the you know the Battle of Ottawa or something like that. It's pretty. I think it's fine. But it was interesting how much there wasn't that like 5 years of occupation. There's so many also influences, especially in the capital, in the cafe culture, some of the architectures, like especially like in the Piazza and Central city area. Even some of like modern feel like I mean I don't want to say like modernity associated with Europe, but like some of it like modern world like a shami. We have all this word I never knew they were Italians. That was adopted to Amharic, which is the national language of Ethiopia. So I think it's there's the Institute of Italy for Art, and I think it's good, but I don't know how close other relationships are and you know government stage, but yeah, there's some influences definitely.
It's a really good point, and you're right about the words, the amount of Italian language that has been Amharicized, including your neighborhood Mercato and Piazza, or Piazza, which is sometimes also called Arada. But there's all these place names, construction names, the names of materials, cars and things. But yeah,
right.
It's fascinating, and food, of course. There's the
Right.
mutual influence of food.
Right.
And so I just wanted to get back to the questions because we've had some, well, there's a great comment here as well that about a movie from the Soviet Union called Come and See, which is about the German invasion of the Ukraine. The attendee says that your video seems like it's in the same spirit, showing the terror that military invasion brings to a place.
Great, thanks for the suggestion. I'll look into it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
Come and see.
And then another, there's another really wonderful question too from one of the attendees asking that besides the constraints of space and material, did the pandemic affect your work in other ways, such as emotional or artistic?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, we're still in it, so it's sort of hard to process. Of course, I feel like I'm still in it and still close to it. But definitely, because like it was like utopic idea to have to do a project about like relating to audience and interaction, doing community project and to make artwork, and it seems like the greatest idea. But now it's so different. You have to think about like space and it's you have to keep it like certain feet away. You have to like I mean it's strange. I would never imagine that would happen. I think I'm still really processing it, but it's definitely like made me like reconsider everything about the type of work. Like gathering people seems the best idea, and not in the current stage we are right now. But I mean, it's I guess and also it kind of make us more involved with technology. Like we're having this through Zoom right now, or having kind of opening up other facilities. So it's definitely going to affect other things. Definitely, I'm not quite sure how. We're still in it, but it's changing. It's changing us so much. We're still just too close to realize why it's changing.
It's a good question too or a good point that you're making about when we're still in it, it's hard to reflect back on it critically. But I was wondering too about the intended scale of the projected image, because my introduction to your work was enormous, right? It was site specific. It was projected onto the blank party wall of the Wolfsonian. And then this work is the size of my computer, my laptop. And since you're also producing this work essentially in quarantine, do you think there's something that's changed about the way that you're intending it to be viewed or experienced?
I would say this movie, I mean, this show won't be like a big scale projection. It might be like a smaller scale. I mean, if maybe not monitor, maybe like a projection. I guess monitor makes it more like kind of domestic or something like that, or more like personal. But I don't think of it as a personal project. So I think projection would be ideal, but maybe not like a large scale. So it's definitely changing that like how the work should be experienced. Definitely is changing that. I'm also currently working on other projects which would be like fully exhibited online, which is like another effect from the pandemic. So now I have to think about the ratio of a computer, a TV monitor, or computer monitor, stuff like that, which is really affecting all these decisions before you can just do what you like and just see how it works out. So there's definitely an effect from that.
No, it's true. And this actually leads to a question that two of the audience are asking, which is about your plans for showing the work, whether in other venues like festivals, biennials and so on, or making it available for viewing and sharing.
It's you mean like the second question is like viewing on like online available, or
I would imagine,
probably not just like online like available. I guess it's just I definitely like to have it exhibited in specific settings, but it also needs a context. I feel like if you show something, it needs like a context rather than like showing it. So I'll be interested in screening it in definitely biennial galleries. I wouldn't really say it's a kind of public space type of work.
Mm-hmm.
Because of some of the graphics and stuff like that. But yeah, it would be more like sort of like you need like a threshold space, like a gallery or something like that. You go like experience it. Also online, I think I understand it's like this special event, but yeah, also experiencing online is different because again, that makes it like kind of public work in a way, like a virtual public display. So it's, yeah, I wouldn't really say, I would say it's a kind of public type of work that's kind of open, any age group can see it or something like that.
That's very interesting. And then one of the other questions that John Mogul, our colleague at the Wolfsonian, was asking too was about other historical source material besides the things that you found at the Wolfsonian. You already talked about archival sound that you've incorporated. Are there other sources as well that you were looking at?
Just generally, like when I was researching the materials from the museum, I would like search about like the illustrator, like what other works they've done or stuff like that. But generally, there was enough for me to just sort of like process from the material from the museum, because there's a lot more than that than I specifically selected. So yeah, but yeah, I was just curious about certain things, like, or like just historical reference to like Mussolini's intention or that stuff like that, or just like historical reference to like a vital space, some of the ideas, but it's just more like a general resource about like what was kind of learning about the intention. I also say like the documentary was really brilliant. So if anyone interested in learning about the Ethio-Italy War from archive.org, the Ethio-Italy War, it was really, I thought was really fantastic. Just learning about like the measures like the Ethiopian king took and what the emperor did or stuff like that. It was really fascinating. It was brilliant. It was just really brilliant strategies and effort and hard work of not just also Ethiopia, the world working, to sort of have Ethiopia keep their independence.
That's terrific. And have you had feedback on your work from your family, from your friends in Ethiopia? Have they had a chance to look at it?
I haven't showed it to. I haven't showed it yet in Ethiopia yet. I have it in a group screening end of this year for first time in Ethiopia. So I'm curious. I mean, it's in Italian too. I kept it in Italian, the language. They don't speak Italian in Ethiopia, so but there's English subtitle. Yeah, that makes it a bit less accessible. I mean, there's a large amount of Ethiopian population speaks English, especially the educated groups, but it's still there's some sort of removal because of the language. But I feel like it's very relevant because some of the texts I'm using are from the propaganda materials. So I really wanted to keep that straight as is. I didn't want to, there was nothing I changed. All the words are straight from this source materials, all the text, including the title, which is actually an illustration book for kids by, I think his name is, about Mussolini. You might know the book, the Favola Vera. It's by, where's the name? I'm sorry. So basically, it's like a children illustration book about Mussolini, and that's the title of it. So yeah, everything I kept it. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense to make it an Amharic, which makes it again a bit removable. But I'm curious about what they're going to respond, because growing up in Ethiopia, our interpretation of the war is like very like, oh, we won the war, and but they were like really proud of it and stuff like that. But this some of the materials that may not gonna make some Ethiopians proud about it, or it's uncomfortable. So some of the images. So yeah, I don't know what's the reaction would be like. I'll be curious.
I'd be very curious too. It's such a wonderful way of dealing with the archival material and of exploring history in this work. And I'm really curious to see what Ethiopian reactions are going to be to it. It'd be really interesting. especially now that there's, there are within Addis, because we should also mention for our audience that Addis Ababa is going through an extraordinary period of growth right now. I mean, the city is nearly unrecognizable from year to year, but because of that explosive growth, there's also a very active demolition of cultural heritage sites, including buildings from before the Italian invasion, but also buildings from the Italian occupation are being lost now. And so there's a preservation movement going on in order to preserve these pieces of the country's heritage. So I'd be really curious to see what the response to your work is in this context, especially now as there's a kind of a reevaluation, I think, of the first half of the 20th century, especially in Addis.
Interesting. Yes, I'd be curious.
So, Ezra, we do have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask you before we leave what you're working on now and what are your plans?
Currently, I'm working on an animation about just like has to do with the sustainability of the world. So I interviewed over about 100 people, and well, I worked with the college students. They went out, traveled throughout the country of Ethiopia. They interviewed about 100 people, like a survey, kind of imagining what a sustainable world is like, just environmentally, because Ethiopia is like 80% of the population livelihood is farming. It's very vulnerable, and then mainly using a traditional farming method. So it's very vulnerable for any like a subtle environmental shift. So it's just a way to kind of initiate conversation, and then kind of having like a vision about kind of this possible idea. And so from this like the 100 survey, I am making a 3 minutes video of animation, like kind of constructing out of all the things they said, like they imagined what a potential like sustainable world could be like. So I'm also hoping to sort of highlight possibly Ethiopia has like an ancient agricultural practice, maybe to highlight some of those practices, because of there is just like a desperation for economic development, and some of the ancient agricultural practices are being sort of kind of getting pushed away because they're not kind of meeting the product value. So I'm hoping to sort of like highlight some of the like disappearing like trees and practices and stuff like that, or this vegetation, and also maybe possibly a way to create like an exchange of like knowledge sharing. So by having everybody's ideas together to kind of create this like a knowledge sharing kind of platform. So it's a pretty ambitious project, but I started the project about a couple of weeks ago. So I'll be working on it for the next like 2-3 months.
This is fascinating. And are you working with partners as part of this project? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm working alone, but yeah, for the interview, since I couldn't leave because of the pandemic, I worked with Addis Ababa University art school students. So I work with them. So they traveled around different places throughout the country. Yeah, I'm just in conversation with them and transcribing the interviews into like a writing, and then translating that into image for me to make animation. Yeah, but it's commissioned for like an organization, but it's a commission piece. But the subject is like sustainability and like the potential of how people could be able to achieve that through imagination.
That is really fascinating. I can't wait to see that work or see the results of it. What a fascinating project. Well, I'm going to wrap up now simply by extending my gratitude to you, Ezra Ube, for joining us this evening. And again, I want to thank our hosts, the Wolfsonian and the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab, for helping to make this happen, as well as Oscar Rivling and John Mogul, who really put this all together. And I want to thank all of you, but most of all, I want to thank you, my guest, Ezra Ube, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time and your interest to learn about my practice. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
I'm a Siganalo.
I'm a second.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Take care.